February 13, 1945, a cold winter night in eastern Germany. The war was almost over. Hitler's empire was collapsing. Soviet armies were closing in from the east, and Allied bombers ruled the skies. And yet, in the heart of Germany, there remained one city, untouched, almost innocent amid the ruins. Dresden, a city of art, music, and architecture. The Florence on the Elbe. Its churches and palaces had stood for centuries. Its streets were lined with refugees fleeing the Eastern Front. Its people still believed, somehow, that the storm might pass them by. They were wrong. In less than 48 hours, Dresden would become a sea of fire, and tens of thousands of lives would vanish into smoke. This is the story of how beauty met destruction, and how, when the fire fell from the sky, a city was erased from the map. By early 1945, Nazi Germany was finished. Allied troops were advancing from the west. The Soviets were just 100 miles from Berlin. But the war was not yet over, and for the Allied Air Command, particularly the British Royal Air Force under Sir Arthur Bomber Harris, there was one final mission: to break Germany's will completely. Harris believed in strategic bombing, that destroying enemy cities could shatter morale and end the war faster. Factories, transportation hubs, and worker housing were all considered legitimate targets, but by 1945 almost every major German city, Hamburg, Cologne, Berlin, had already been bombed to rubble. Except one, Dresden. Dresden was not just another city. It was a cultural masterpiece, filled with art galleries, cathedrals, and theaters, the Zwinger Palace, the Semper Opera House, the Frauenkirche, symbols of Europe's golden age. It was also crowded beyond capacity. As the Soviet army advanced through Poland, hundreds of thousands of German refugees fled west, into Dresden, believing it was safe. By February 1945, the city's population had swelled from 600,000 to nearly 1 million. There were no major anti-aircraft guns, no air raid shelters large enough, no serious military presence. Dresden was, in every sense, defenseless. And yet, it was about to become a target. On February 4th, at the Yalta Conference, Allied leaders, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin, discussed the final phase of the war. Stalin requested airstrikes to disrupt German troop movements and supplies headed toward the Eastern Front. One of the suggested targets, Dresden, a key railway and communication hub. But there was another motive, one unspoken: to send a message, not just to Germany, but to the world and to the Soviets, that Allied air power could reach anywhere, anytime. On February 13th, Bomber Command gave the order: target Dresden. Purpose: to destroy the city's rail junctions and undermine German morale. The operation would involve over 1,200 bombers, and British by night, American by day. No one in Dresden had any idea what was coming. Night fell on February 13th. At 10:03 p.m., the air raid sirens wailed. Within minutes, the first wave of RAF Lancasters appeared over the city, hundreds of them, flying in perfect formation, their bomb bays filled with high explosives and incendiaries. Spotter aircraft dropped flares, bright, ghostly lights that marked the city center. And then, the bombs began to fall. The first wave lasted only 15 minutes, but it tore the heart out of Dresden. High explosive bombs shattered roofs and windows, allowing the next wave of firebombs, small cylinders filled with magnesium and phosphorus, to ignite everything inside. Flames leapt from building to building. The air itself caught fire. Within an hour, Dresden was burning, a storm of flames so intense that it created its own wind, a firestorm, sucking oxygen from the streets, pulling people into the blaze. Those who ran for cover suffocated in bomb shelters. Those who stayed above ground burned where they stood. A survivor later wrote, "The heat was beyond belief. The air was alive with fire. People became living torches. Just as survivors thought it was over, 3 hours later, the second wave arrived." At 1:30 a.m., another 500 bombers appeared over the burning city, their target the flames. They dropped more incendiaries on what was already an inferno. Entire city blocks vanished into liquid fire. The temperature reached over 1,500 degrees Celsius. Pavement melted, stone buildings exploded. People trying to escape into the open were incinerated in seconds. Those in basements were boiled alive by superheated air. In the city center, the firestorm's wind reached hurricane force. Trees uprooted, cars flipped, bodies sucked into the flames. In a single night, Dresden ceased to exist. When dawn came on February 14th, nothing remained but smoke and ash. Tens of thousands were dead, many burned beyond recognition, others buried alive in cellars. The Elbe River ran black with soot and oil. But the nightmare was not over. At noon, American B-17 bombers arrived for the daylight raids, dropping another 400 tons of bombs on the ruins, hitting rail yards, bridges, and what little still stood. The destruction was total. By February 15th, the city was gone. The true number of dead will never be known. Early Nazi propaganda claimed 200,000. Modern research estimates around 25,000 civilians killed, but each number represents a life, a family, a story lost in fire. Entire neighborhoods vanished, hospitals, schools, churches, all destroyed. Even the Frauenkirche, the city's most beloved church, collapsed into rubble. Dresden, the city of light, had become a city of shadows. When Allied reconnaissance planes flew over the ruins days later, they could hardly recognize the landscape. It was as if the city had been erased by a god of fire. The images shocked even those who ordered the attack. Winston Churchill himself, just weeks later, wrote a memo calling the raid an unnecessary act of terror. But by then, the damage was done. Dresden had become a symbol, for some, of the brutality of total war. For others, a grim necessity to hasten Nazi defeat. Among the survivors, there was no debate, only silence, and the haunting smell of ash that lingered for months. After the war, Dresden became a rallying cry for peace, for memory, and for controversy. To many Germans, it was proof that war spares no one, that even the victors can become destroyers. To the Allies, it remained a tragic but strategic operation. The debate endures to this day. Was Dresden a military target or a massacre? But in the ruins, the question felt meaningless, because in Dresden, everyone burned the same. In the decades after the war, Dresden was rebuilt, stone by stone, street by street. The people refused to let their city die. For half a century, the ruins of the Frauenkirche were left untouched, a blackened pile of stones, a memorial to the night when the sky itself turned to fire. Then, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, citizens from around the world donated to rebuild it. In 2005, the church was reopened, its dome rising once again above the skyline, a symbol not of vengeance, but of reconciliation. Today, Dresden stands beautiful again, but scarred forever. Each February, candles line the streets, bells toll across the Elbe, and survivors, the few who remain, whisper the same words. We remember not for hate, but so that it never happens again. Dresden's firestorm was one of the last great tragedies of World War II, a city consumed not by ideology, but by the simple, merciless logic of war. When fire fell from the sky, it burned away more than stone and flesh. It burned away illusions of victory, of morality, of humanity itself. And yet, from those ashes, a city rose again, not in anger, but in remembrance. For in Dresden, the light that once made it beautiful now burns as memory, a warning to all who forget that even in victory, war devours everything.